but we will. But let's officially start. So first of all, I would like to thank everyone for being here, because it's not easy to be connected from 3 different continents. But it is a goal in itself to share experience from so various countries and to discuss the impact of COVID in our countries. Because I would like to discuss the situation, first of all, like a brief description of the situation in each country, and to see how COVID is intersecting with some underlying inequality crisis that was already in place in some of our countries, to discuss about the challenges faced both at organizational level and individual level, like in employees level, and by HR, and also the challenges faced by universities, because we are all academics. And then to think and discuss potential solutions and the solutions that are already implemented within our countries. So we will go and discuss about each of these topics, like briefly, because we will not have so much time. We expect this meeting to last about 1.5 hours. And I would like to briefly introduce our speakers, the guests that I'm really happy to have here. So we first have Anu Singh Latter, who is a professor and vice chancellor from Ambedkar University from Delhi, India, and she is with over 20 years of academic and consultancy experience in both HR and organizational behavior. Then we have Joop Vinke, who is a senior lecturer from Arnhem Business School from the Netherlands. And he's also having an extended career in HRM, in non-profit and both profit organizations. He's now very focused into coaching and training, and I have met him while teaching, and I can tell you that he approaches a very innovative teaching style. Then we have Joseph Goodman, or Joe, how we should call him during this meeting. He's associate professor from Illinois State University. He's specialized in human resource management and also a certified senior professional in human resources. Then we have Loredana Orhei. She's a lecturer at Han University from the Netherlands. She's consultant and a coach and also researcher, and she's focused and interested in social and commercial entrepreneurship. So she's bringing quite a nice side touch on our discussions. Then we have Sorin Dan. He's a postdoctoral researcher from InnoLab, University of Vasa in Finland. And it is quite nice to have the northern part of Europe together here with us. He's part of a project which is specialized in digitalization, and he will bring some input related to talent shortages and ways to improve digital competencies. Then we have Santosh Singh. He's the organizer, as I said, of this event, because he had the first idea to initiate this meeting. So I would like to give a special thanks to Santosh. He's a very nice man, so I personally know him, and I see that he's a doer and very ambitious in his activities. And I also want to thank to Dinesh, because he is offering us the technical support for organizing this meeting. So this is a very brief introduction. Please free to come up with any other information about yourself and about the situation in your country. And now briefly, each of us we should present some descriptions, some details about the situation of the lockdown in our countries and how it impacted at national level the situation in our countries. Who would like to start?
Well, I can start if you want, because I see you now. I'm on the second place, I see, at least at my screen. Now, after this introduction of myself, I'm from the Netherlands, Arnhem. It is in the east of the Netherlands. In the Netherlands, we didn't have a real lockdown, as you call it. We called it an intelligent lockdown, which means that it was not, they asked the people to stay at home and the companies to close. They didn't close the schools. They did it later. And we already, that started about 13th of March, and we just on the 1st of June, we opened again, and we're now slowly opening. So we're over the big point, as you can see. The heaviest part was in half of April, at the end of April, beginning of May, and we're now opening. So the schools have started again. The university stayed open, but only gave lectures online, and they will keep on doing that at least till September. And they're now talking even of keeping online lectures even for the rest of this year, because. Yeah, I can talk a little bit more about it later when we talk about what the effect was for the university. When it comes with how we deal with it, that they try to give, the government tried to give a lot of responsibility to the people themselves. So stay at home if you're not feeling well, go to the doctor, etc. So that was totally a different way than you have to stay at home and we will check if you are at home. When it comes to the companies, well, a lot of them closed themselves, of course, and the government has given support to every company who had to pay their employees. The employers got from the government money to pay it till a maximum of 90% of all wages. And they are doing that already now for 3 months. And they are thinking about doing it for the next 3 months too. So there's a lot of financial support from the government. What can I tell more about it? Maybe that.
I think that was basically the basic idea. So we at a moment we just shut down, but then you could move. And I think if I look around, I think people got used to the practices of you have to clean your cart in the supermarket and all the little things. But I'm also noticing that people are coming back to the normal behavior. So there's less attention to, okay, how far am I from the person next to me? So that's kind of easing down quite a bit. And terraces opened 2 weeks ago or a week ago, I think.
Yeah.
They're full again. So it's like nothing actually happened. It kind of feels that way. Besides, the disinfectant in the supermarket and those kind of things. But further, I think people are coming very fast back to normal behavior. My impression when I look around.
Yeah, I have to say.
What about you, Joe? Do you feel like you are getting back to normal already?
Well, it's because of the size of the United States and the different areas of population density. It's unique. States like where I'm originally from, Mississippi, are moving more to normalcy because the population density is very low. The state that I'm currently in, because I'm a professor at Illinois State University, with Chicago, we have about 17 million population in our state, with 8 million to 9 million of those in Chicago. So that's about a 60-mile radius around the city center. Everything is still very much tightly controlled. To go out into public, you have to have a mask on. The stores are actually limiting the numbers of customers that can go into the stores. Our essential businesses stayed open. It's kind of unique about, who was deemed essential versus non-essential.
That's a good point.
I thought of a new title to refer this, because these were our invisible employees who we now realize are very essential to our everyday life.
I'm so happy you point this out.
It was unique to see who could go. And likewise, like you've said, is for those who were, we've had the largest unemployment since the Great Depression in the 1930s in the US. We approached close to 30% unemployment. So our government stepped in and issued reimbursement checks to employees who were laid off. And then for small businesses, and for definitional purposes, so that everyone knows, when I say a small business, I mean a firm less than 500 employees. A medium business is anywhere from 500 to 2,000 employees, and anything greater than 2,000 is considered a large employee. So our small business employers were given no interest loans, and if they use them to subsidize payrolls for payroll purposes, it is a tax-free grant. There's several layers of paperwork these firms are having to fill out to justify that. And anyway, and then I have some examples that as we go through, I can share of different employers around the United States. But to reemphasize, the large population densities are still more locked down, still more regulated. And it would be wrong of me not to also mention our current situation and political climate has really put the country on edge. Are we going to see another spike? Because I'm sure all of you are aware of police officers mishandling of an individual. We have,
and it created a lot of huge reaction in the other countries also. Like now it becomes so global, and everyone is focused on this issue.
Yeah. So we're fighting fighting is the wrong word, and we're struggling with, how do we rebound from COVID and now the unrest, because it was uncalled for. But anyway,
this issue is also related to the fact that in COVID, you have there is a higher death rate for different nationalities or different ethnicities. So they might be also connected, of this reaction. What about the Nordic countries, Sorin?
Yes, well, Nordic countries are not necessarily the same. I'm in Finland. We can also talk a bit about Sweden, although I know more about Finland than I know about Sweden. Finland, in the government of Finland. Well, first of all, I should add that Finland is in a way a special case. It's a Nordic country. It's a sparsely populated country. In fact, it's the most sparsely populated country in the EU. Just to give you an idea, it has about the same size of Germany, but in Finland there are 5.5 million people, whereas in Germany there are 80 million people. So just to have in mind the proportion a little bit. And it's surrounded by nature, by lakes, forests, and so forth, which makes it a very nice natural environment for the government to say, of course, we imposed a lockdown, which means that schools are closed, some institutions are closed, though you might get in if you have an appointment. Of course, for healthcare services, with an appointment, you could get in, but not without the appointment. And I think schools, that was definitely the main point, that schools should be closed and that people should keep the distance and should avoid interactions, but they should not avoid going out in nature as much as possible. And at the same time, I know that there's a whole debate about the benefit of wearing a mask, but I've seen just a few people all of these months wearing masks in Finland. Nobody's wearing them. And that's surprising, I would say, but yes, but now it's getting better. Of course, there are very few cases, and restaurants, terraces opened. So the state of emergency ended at the end of May. So from June, terraces and restaurants are open, and other institutions, but universities have not opened yet. Of course, it's the end of the semester. For instance, our university will open officially on the 14th of August. So, and I think there is also the expectation that in some cases, online courses, which are quite widely spread in Finland, I guess we can talk more about this when we get to the academic section of our discussion, and PhD defenses online and so forth, quite some novel, innovative approaches to deal with this, because Finland is one of the most digitalized, and people have one of the highest digital skills in Europe and in the EU.
Good. And what about India, which is again a challenge to try to summarize India experience?
Yes, what Sorin has been talking about the population size, which is very small in his country. India is the whole of Europe combined. We are 1.232 billion people, and 18% of the world population lives here in Indian country. India is a subcontinent. So the scale of pandemic here was much larger than the scale felt everywhere else. We currently have about 300,000 patients of coronavirus, and death toll has been much less when you look at the ratio. It has just been 8,000, little more than 8,000 people who died because of this virus. And the recovery rate has also been quite okay. Like we have 140,000 people who have recovered, and the current active cases have been 138,000 people. We've got about 34 states, and we have the density of population also is very high. So the likelihood of spread of infection is also very high. So the first case of corona which appeared in India was on 30th January. There was this medical student who had come from Wuhan. She was doing her master's in medical sciences there, and she came for the vacation, and she was quarantined for a few days, but later on she was found corona positive on 30th of January. The government of India decided to go for lockdown as was perceived and well planned, because we knew the geographical area and density of population. Looking at some of the cities which are highly dense, like Delhi and Mumbai and Chennai and all our metropolitan cities. So even before the lockdown started here in our country, the government issued a lot of advisory initially for all of us. The advisory was in terms of the travel advisories for not traveling domestically and for international visits. They were all cancelled, and government officials were asked to cancel all their trips abroad. Then there were restrictions on the public gatherings also for initially for a few days. And then our social media and print and electronic media really supported government of India in terms of creating the public awareness about what corona was all about. And we've got Indian Council for Medical Research, ICMR, which played a very, very, very active role in terms of creating that public awareness about what kind of protocol needs to be followed during the spread, if it happens, if the pandemic spreads and it becomes the community spread later on. So we were very proactive in terms of the information spread, and also in terms of how people should maintain the social distancing everywhere. The masks were distributed freely to everyone at the government offices, in private multinational corporations also distributed the masks, and all other chemicals or some sanitizers free to all their employees. Then we went in for the lockdown on 25th of March. That was the first wave of lockdown. We are currently into the fourth wave of lockdown, which is also now unlocking. We had government advisories being issued, and during this lockdown, it was a late evening curfew from 7 to 7 in our all four phases. So the current situation is that we are likely the community spread is already there, and we are seeing the rise in cases every day, and I am in Delhi, and I keep my fingers crossed all the time while I go to office, because administrative offices have been opened in the third phase, the third wave of lockdown. We were all advised to move to our administrative offices, though the school, the colleges, the private business houses and everything was locked down completely. But in the fourth wave, we have opened some businesses. Essential services were permitted in all four waves of our lockdown. But now, while we are trying to live with corona around, and there has been, earlier I used to hear in news on the news channel saying there are 100 cases, 20 cases, but now I hear cases which are next door, and maybe like in the last week, there was one corona patient in my own bank. We have got a bank in the university premises, and one of the employees was affected. So we closed the university, got the fumigation and sanitization done for the whole campus. And even today, the whole day, my sanitary staff was working towards sanitation work today completely. Now, we are actually living with the fear of corona, which has spread completely in community now. And the
What
ICMR believes that this is going to be an upsurge in the cases in June and July. So we're keeping our fingers crossed on that.
what I remember from the news is a specific phenomenon in India that people had to move or just moved when everything started, all the lockdown started. They had to move to their homes, especially the ones who were working in other regions. So they had to travel like huge distances without public transportation because the public transportation was already off. So it was quite a challenge for people to settle down somehow for the lockdown. And also now you mentioned about how far from us were the corona cases, the virus cases, and at least in Romania, I think we still have difficulties in or pointing out to people whom we know that had this virus, because the percentage is so low for us that we barely can point to some persons that we know, or they know someone who had it. Of course, we have some regions like some focus regions where it spreaded more stronger, but otherwise the percentage is still low. But also this happened because we started the lockdown very early. So we started the lockdown before anyone could see around us that it is a problem, but they are monitoring what's happening in the other countries. So they just follow the trend of starting the lockdown before having a real issue at the country level. And even now, our reaction is very defensive. So we are still with all the schools shut down, with universities shut down, and there are also already rumors that this might go on for a while, even for universities. And this is one of my concerns. Will we have the next year also online, or will we go back to normal teaching? But I think we'll discuss about this issue in the following topics. So what about the businesses? How did the companies reacted to this situation? How the HR reacted? On what practices do you know they implemented?
As far as migrant labor is concerned, as you rightly said, initially, because as I said, we are a very big country, so the numbers are very big and very large in terms of everything. So the migrant labor, which essentially moved from their hometowns to places like Mumbai, Delhi, and wherever they could find job, were in all sectors, precisely in manufacturing, in a farm sector, in construction work, etc. So they wanted to, it's a human instinct to go back home.
Exactly.
So they insisted on going back home for the reason that they wanted to feel very secure with their own people back home. Initially, because transport was shut down completely, So government took care of them by providing free meals to them all 3 times a day, and also giving them some kind of wages so that they could look after their families. But because of lot of pressure which came on them, and it led to some kind of depression where they started feeling that they may not meet their dear ones ever in their life. So they started even going by road. They started walking long distances. But however, government ensured through, because we are a federal structure, so the distances are very big distances to cover. For example, from Delhi to Bihar would be somewhere around 800 to 1200 kilometers distance. So government then decided to have the federal discussion. So each state has provided the backup support for the migrant workers to reach their homes. And now we have the trains, special trains being run for them. So I would say, if I look at Delhi from where I come from and where I am right now, probably 90% of the migrant laborers already moved back home. So it's roughly around 10% who stayed back here. So
I'm glad that you mentioned these migrant workers, because we had a kind of similar issue. We have a lot of Romanians who are working abroad in other European countries, and we are talking here about mainly daily workers, or not in the primary labor markets, so like poor jobs, maybe low paid, unsecured jobs. So a lot of those people, because of the lockdown in the other countries, had to come back. So they returned back, but here the receive was not so open, because also our government was scared that when all these people with possible infections would come back, they would spread the virus among Romanians. So it was, at some moment, you could feel some kind of conflict, and very challenging situations in which people were afraid one of the other, and the migrant workers were getting back, were received not very welcome way by the home families. So it was quite an awkward situation, and I hope people will forget about those issues they faced during
But
that
I
period.
have one thing to add here. Multinational companies, particularly the IT sector and telecommunication, was the sector which did not feel the heat of all this, because IT here in India, they were already working from home. Like IBM, Adobe, there are
Mhm.
typically multinational firms which had already encouraged working from home. So though they have recruited fresh employees, but they have delayed the process for some time. And telecommunication has really boomed because everything has gone online, and all platforms which are online platforms are very actively being used for all purposes, like we are all sitting here through the Zoom meeting today. So the business has taken a different turn, and telecom and IT, I believe, has been the most beneficiary during the lockdown period.
Mhm.
So the human resource issues and challenges in these sectors have taken a different turn in the sense that technical skill training has taken the center stage, even with the managers, human resource managers, particularly, for example, they are expected to take the technical skills training now. So
Mhm.
training has taken the center stage in multinational firms in IT
Mhm.
and communication.
I think another thing is that you pointed again to different to nice ideas. First, there are differences in how companies react based on the sector, the economic sector, and we have the IT sector where companies react in a different way, and then we have a difference in their reactions based on their size, because larger companies can afford to support more their employees and have a more active, let's say, or a more supporting reaction towards their employees. On the other hand, the small businesses, they are more under the risk of just going off and just not being able to survive. So even today we had one of the biggest IT companies here in Cluj, because here we are also a very IT area, and we count on IT a lot. And he said that he thinks that it's one of the biggest crises that we are going through after the Second World War. And when such a huge IT company, the CEO of such an IT company comes and openly says it in mass media, then you expect some effects following this. And the small businesses, of course, as they were stronger hit by this crisis. What about the other countries?
I would say just some things to add. We know that it was a hiccup, but here in the United States, those companies who were deemed essential. So before I came on, I sent some requests for some of the companies that I interact with. And those companies that were deemed essential, they had to figure out ways to rotate their staffs in and out to continue to get the work. So I'm going to speak about a logistics company that I talk about. This is New Way Transportation. They were okay with me using their name. They have about 500 employees, 200 of which are in the office, and the rest of which are transportation drivers. And those office staffs, they control the routes and how the deliveries have to be made. And I'm going to assume other countries had a run on goods and perishable items, because when the panic set in, the grocery stores and they emptied, the shelves emptied here in the United States. And the product, we had the product, but the supply chain getting it there was disrupted. So the logistics companies were deemed essential. And the employees, they're rotating the employees in and out of the shifts. And before each shift, this organization told me is they would do a massive cleaning in the organization before the next shift would come in. And then when you came to work, you had to have your temperature taken and answer a few questions. And then they would allow them in the organization. Well, they had healthy employees getting sick, but it wasn't because of the coronavirus. They were getting sick because of all of the pesticides in the cleaning. And no one had ever looked at the ingredients of the certain cleaning products and just the particles that were still in the air. So they completely had to change the type of cleaning materials they were using. They were looking for more environmental friendly, non-toxic cleaners. It never dawned on them that you can use too much, and I'll use a product name here, Lysol. The ingredients just made them sick. And so now here they are, the grocery stores and the supply chains are emptied. They're trying to find cleaning supplies to keep their workers getting the supply routes going to the organizations. And what they told me they ended up having to do was they worked with their vendors, their suppliers, and their customers, and they started bartering on the backside. So do you have more sanitizer? Do you need paper products? We can get you paper products if you'll swap sanitizer. And it was this unique, it was that human relationships that the logistics people had with all of their suppliers, vendors, and customers. They were able to piecemeal put together supplying across the nation. And it was just lovely to see. Another example I want to share with you of a challenge that we had was in the United States, we approached about 30% unemployment. Again, the largest since the Great Depression. And what companies opted to do was to allow the employees to keep their medical benefits through this process, although they were laid off. That created some logistics issues based on US employment law on what is defined as a person who has been laid off or furloughed and the types of activities that they can do. And so I spoke with this gentleman's name is Scott. I can't use his company, but he runs a human resource information systems. That's what he does. And he worked with companies to change their online employee platforms so that they could only access their benefits pages and not be considered working. So they could officially be laid off and pull the benefits of unemployment insurance. And he said that was a unique experience because it was they had to write computer programs that they had never envisioned. You know, I have to allow you to see your employee portfolio, but in order to see that, you had to be logged on. How do I keep you logged on and not make this compensable time? And it was, you know, something to work through. They asked for patience with their employees, and their employees graciously gave that. But then I talked with another employee whose name's Elizabeth. She said the first few weeks, she was stressed. She didn't know if she was ever going to have her job, and her employer was completely silent. And it was a phone call from her supervisor, and she said, I had to let my emotions out. And to use her words, she said, I emotionally vomited on my supervisor. And that's when her company realized, oh, we have to actually talk to our employees more in this process, because the managers were trying to get the organization functioning, and the employees were wondering, is my job over forever? And they were dealing with childcare issues, and spouses who had to share work environments with them now. And said, you know, it was hard, but once the communication started, and again, to quote her, we were having grown-up communication, my anxiety went away. And I think those were the biggest challenges that our organizations faced.
I think you just raised a main point again, because managing communication with the employee was considered to be in a huge survey on over 100 companies around the globe. They said that managing the communication with their employees was one of the challenges they faced during this situation. And also managing flexible work arrangements was another issue they were facing. And I can add here an example that I also got from another IT company here in Romania. And they said, you know what, I don't want, it was a CEO quoting the CEO, I don't want people to get back to offices because I don't want to take risk. And besides that, I cannot afford to make sure that I follow the rules that were nationally imposed. So we have the distance rules. So you have to make sure that the employees are spaced like 2 meters away, which if you have like an open space for your desk for the offices, you cannot bring all of them together. So as you mentioned earlier, you'd have to make arrangements that people rotate and they come at different times, or they take like 2 weeks at the office, 2 weeks off the office, and the employees rotate, but this is not easy to do. And another fear managers had was, if anything happens, you know, if we have a case here you are very blamed, like ashamed, you know, and they would say, this company did not do enough to protect their employees, and you will appear in mass media, which is very shameful for a company. You do not want negative marketing for your company. So companies were so reluctant to bring their employees back to offices. And then what happened is that even the ones who wanted to bring them back, the employees do not want to get back to offices. So a lot of people would say, I don't feel safe, I would prefer to work from home. They already notice that it is possible to work from home, that they are efficient enough and they are productive enough to work from home. So people are reluctant, and this happened also in education system, in schools and universities. People do not want to go back to their offices. So they would rather work from home. And here it's a challenge for a management decision what to do. Can you afford to bring them back, or you have to go on and find solutions to manage this remote work? Because indeed, for many companies, this remote work is working. And in fact, any crisis has the side positive effect that it brings changes and it brings innovation and it brings solutions that we all find in order to, that help us to improve, because in times of crisis, usually we find opportunities for change. And I'm sure that all of us, at some point we realize that in fact we are changing ourselves and we can improve our work. And it's impressive to realize that instead of so in a crisis situation we find things possible, positive solutions for the future. What about the other countries? What experience would you like to share?
One of the things that we had in Holland, because of that special approach, by giving the responsibility to the people, is that you saw that a lot of people took that responsibility, including the workers, and by the actions of the government, by giving the almost all small companies money to pay their employees. There was also not much layoffs, because it was not allowed to do layout during the time. You could even get a fine, and so it was very, very interesting. Even people, flex workers that only worked when you call them, they still got their own money even when they didn't come. So it was a very interesting situation to see that you don't work for 2 months,
exactly,
and still every month you get your money. So it was a very interesting, unique situation.
Yeah, I'm happy. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, no, please. Sorry.
No, please.
Yes, I was saying that this is a very fortunate European experience because of the welfare state. Of course, you have the government who is quite active and supporting such a difficult economic situation. I'm not sure if this is the right moment, because I also wanted to share with you. Building on the same idea that Monica raised before, that difficult times can also bring innovation. And I think that some businesses in some sectors were able to capitalize on this and to do things differently to their own advantage. So for instance, if we think about HoReCa industry, which we know that the services industry have been quite affected. And HoReCa, of course, we could not travel, we could not go to the restaurant. It was one of the hardly hit industries, but food delivery, for instance, some food delivery company, for instance, Volt, which is a Helsinki-based food delivery company, said, okay, well, how can we do this in a way that we minimize human contact? So they introduced the concept of, well, I'm not sure if they introduced it, but anyway, they used the concept of no contact delivery, which basically means that you would have your own staff at the company, and then you would just leave your delivery somewhere in a place, and then the couriers who are supposed to transport, to deliver this, they would just pick it up later. So without any human contact to reduce this. And it seems to have worked quite well. And of course, people were also, or there's some, those who like to make deliveries, they were also using these options because it was still possible today. You could not go to the restaurant, but you could ask for a delivery at home. So I think that was quite a good example of doing things differently in different times, difficult times.
Yes, true. That's true, Sorin. And I'm happy that you brought this example here.
I want to, this is a good time to insert that in the United States, we were humbled. And I want to be prefaced in how I say this, because we're very stoic and we want to lead the world in everything. And companies and the United States, we had to look at the rest of the world and say, what is working elsewhere? And that is hard for us. And I don't mean to speak for the entire nation, but it really is. And when Soren talked about home delivery, that this is novel to the United States because I'm independent. I can do this myself. And we were operating under this bounded rationality that we could fix it ourselves. And it wasn't until we said, okay, what's working elsewhere? did we start picking ourselves up? And I just wanted to insert that real quick.
Yeah, I'm quite like it's funny what you say, because here we have the other mentality. We just copy what others are doing. So here we have to be careful in not to copy too much, you know. So we are worried about how to check before if the examples out there fit to our own situation. So this is interesting, yeah, for talking about independence.
Well, we had the same, because if you look in Holland nowadays, you see them more and more wearing masks, but nobody wears masks. Nobody, they were not busy with it because they think it doesn't work, etc. But nowadays, if you travel by public transport, you are asked to wear one.
Yes.
And but that's the only place, in fact, where you wear a mask. If you walk in Holland, you see nobody with a mask. Really not.
No.
So it's interesting to see how in different countries they react on certain situations like this.
We also have in public transportation and any inside areas, inside buildings, it's mandatory to wear masks.
Yeah.
Even if we have such a low number of cases compared to other countries.
Yeah.
Monica, something to add here. We've all been talking about the new normal, and the new normal is working from home, and companies are also insisting on some kind of creating home workstations with more of technology, enabled systems at home. We all know that we presently, since we're all very scared of the virus, and we're thinking of very many ways where we can innovate and create many other ways to facilitate human life. We're doing that. But I personally believe that the human nature cannot be confined to homes. So the new normal is going to be very temporary. The time is going to come where the new normal is also going to go away, and people are going to lead a very normal life as we were leading earlier. So the pandemic of this kind has happened even previously in human race, and while that period got completed and the societies were normal, we are bound to forget all the mental agony we've gone through during this period. But for the near future, I think the new normal is going to stay for some time. And this will also bring in a lot of creativity and a lot of innovation, and technology is going to get the edge over, and a lot of innovation is going to happen. For example, in home appliances particularly, a lot of manufacturing has gone up. People now want to become self-reliant, and because that's again a new normal for them. Any kind of domestic help or help from other sources is no more there. You're all dependent completely on your own self. It will also be giving direction to the technology to innovate more in the areas which would be very specific to each country. Each nation is going to have its own technology focus in terms of the innovation to happen. uh, I feel in India, in a country like India, we may have technology which is going to enable the routine work. For example, we have issues of farm labor and the migrant laborers who have gone back because of the fear and the you can say the psychosis which will stay for a longer time in their mind. The imprints are going to remain fresh for a longer time. So in the meanwhile, I think there would be some innovation for routinized work to happen for the replacing the farm labor, for the construction workers, people needed for manufacturing, etc. So robotics may may shape up in different industry. So I think new normal is also going to stay for some time, but we're going to be as normal as we were earlier. Yeah.
Hopefully. Good. I would like to share some of the feedback that we got from employees. So we had a survey here on over 300 employees, and what they say is that somehow what's good and what's bad. So we asked them what were the negative consequences and what was the positive consequences following COVID. And it was interesting to see that, in fact, the negative consequences were quite low. So our respondents fairly mentioned anything negative. It's true, the sample might be, again, not random sample, because it's educated people who fill in online questionnaires. So it's not about agriculture people or construction workers who do not get access to internet. So already here we have some biases in our answers, but still, for this kind of respondents, about 50% of them, they mentioned as a negative consequence, losing a sense of belonging to the company and some isolation to the colleagues. But we found like 50%, 1 point out of 100. So this is not too much. So not that many people have these negative consequences. On the other hand, also about 10%, they were fearing the loss of or a decrease of career advancement opportunities, or some difficulties related to planning their work, or some household distractions. But again, this was only 10% of the respondents. And having a reduced income within the household. On the other hand, the positive consequences, which were highlighted by most of the respondents, was having taking less time to commute and to get to work and from work. So almost 60% of the respondents said they appreciate taking less time for doing this, having more time for myself or for doing things that I like. So almost a half of the respondents said that they have more time for themselves, more time for their families. Almost 40% of the people said this, more time to do things in the house, so housework. And last, maybe only a quarter says that using technology in a more efficient way is a positive. So somehow we realized that for a lot of Romanians, this lockdown meant having time to stop, because it was a rush. Everyone was in a rush, just doing things, not thinking too much about what we are doing. And they said, now I got time for myself, for my family, to do the things that I like. Now, apart from me, because in my personal case, I definitely work more than I would normally work, but maybe let's say different kind of activities. But a lot of people felt that they had time to breathe, like that kind of insight, that you stop a little bit. And people are quite, a few of them are quite satisfied, and they think that it was not that bad, that this period of lockdown was not that necessarily negative for them.
If I can agree with that. This morning I had a talk with some students who did research in a large trust company in Holland, and they did it every month, and they saw that in the last 2 months that the work balance circle became better. People liked. There was a higher work satisfaction level, and that was very interesting. There was a lower illness level in the last month.
It's a very good point.
Yeah, so these are changing, and we think that the people don't like it, but if you look at those figures, a lot of people liked it. I don't know exactly. This was an amount of, I think, 500 workers or 600 workers. But if you look at it, you saw very interesting figures in effect.
I think that's, if I may add, I think the survey is a case in point, and I'm also aware of a survey that was conducted in Finland on 5,450 workers in both the public and the private sector, and the findings were pretty much as you outlined, Monica, before. 66% of them said, the respondents said that they experienced fewer work interruptions. So that we could say that most of them, so 66% of them, could actually do more work rather than less. But then the negative side, and maybe the problematic side, and I think we have all experienced it more or less, is the social dimension of this, the isolation. So yes, 74% of them said that they, and I quote now, they considered being away from coworkers as a negative aspect. And this is very funny. 74%. Wow. 74. They considered it to be a negative. They are away from coworkers. Now, they got along quite well with their coworkers, I guess. That is not necessarily always the case. But this is very interesting. More than half of the respondents felt isolated and longed for their coworkers. This is according to the to the results of the survey, and it's a bit dramatic, but it has this social dimension, and I think this is quite important. It is about satisfaction and work satisfaction as well. It's an important aspect.
This is quite interesting, because if I'm thinking to Romania as a Latin country who is more like socializing and needs a socializing maybe more than the Nordic countries. So I'm a bit surprised of having Nordic countries saying that they miss socializing. They are not very famous for being so social, or am I wrong?
You're right. I guess as a cultural stereotype, I think that's these are the Nordic called, but they are still humans, they still need human interaction, though maybe to a less extent than Romanians and other Latinos, let's say.
I have some anecdotal data. This is from one company of 85,000 employees. They're not a multinational company. They're contained inside the borders of the US. And so some of the data they shared with us is the only people that were more dissatisfied with this work from home were the managers and the direct supervisors. And they would say things like, we missed the synergy of our impromptu meetings. We missed, something of being able to build off one another. The employees, on the other hand, loved it for what has been said already. They weren't being interrupted, and they were more efficient in their day-to-day task.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's about efficiencies. That's why so many people realize that I can do this work from home and I'm doing it fine. On the other hand, I was just talking with Gabriela the other days, and in the public sector, some people realize that maybe some jobs are not really needed, and a lot of the work can be done without that many people. So you might realize that you can do the work with less people, because not everyone is so efficient in the work that we are doing.
Well, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. I would have liked to know the efficiency, because some of the folks that I spoke with, they said the first couple of weeks were very difficult because they were having to take over role of educator of their children, learn how to work with their spouses. But then magically, they love it now. And I had one person tell me that they work harder now because they don't want to ever go back to the office.
That's my worry also. Like I'm a workaholic. I'm a declared workaholic. So I would have never said that, I would like to stay at home. I would always be at the faculty, always be out. And now I realize, I like it. It's not bad at all. In fact, it's a different life, but I don't mind it. Yeah. So that's interesting.
I think there's also a proportion, because even in this survey it says 66%, but there's at least a third who I think could have experienced actually more interruptions. And I'm particularly thinking, and I'm talking from my personal experience. If you have young kids, schools were closed, you could not give them not take them to the kindergarten. Maybe you are living in an apartment, maybe space, maybe an issue. Of course, maybe you don't have your own office to work and to focus on your work. So it's quite hard in those circumstances to focus on your work. And I think there is a percentage of the of the people, I think, who have experienced challenges during this time as well. I think it's good to emphasize maybe that aspect as well. Though overall, it seemed that for a good number of people, for the majority, it seemed that this has actually worked quite well in terms of work and performance and so forth.
Yeah,
one thing I want.
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, just like this one thing I wanted to add. I think it's so much of a personal experience for everybody. Like it might be completely different from me, and it might be completely different from you. It's also about this idea that like this environment has taught us to hustle, like the word hustle. And we've always been like, we have to achieve greater things. And like, I'm a student myself, I'm in second year. And this idea of like, you know, going to the, like just graduating from college and not having a job to go to, and just like working from home and not having that experience, what like we've always heard of. And this idea of like sitting in a cubicle, having a cup of coffee, that's not going to happen. It's kind of scary, but it's also like, it's also like a personal experience, because you on the other side of the coin, you have experienced all of it, and like you're enjoying your space and all at home, because I think it's a lot of personal time for you. It's a lot about, you realize that like my mom's a teacher, like she's a professor in one of the schools nearby. I'm from India, so she said that like that she has so much time for herself. She doesn't have to wake up at 7 a.m. and rush to school. She can chill. She wakes up at 8, she does her meditation till 9, then she has time for herself. And like even if she has like a class for 2 hours, she doesn't have to travel half an hour for like to get to her office, take the class and come back half an hour. It saves a lot of time. But again, I believe it's a personal experience. Everybody like experiences it in their own way. I think this is something that we like, it'll be like everybody will be reading about it in their history books while we're experiencing it like 10 years from now. I think if at all, touch wood, if we're alive to experience that, that's going to be fun.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
You introduced another topic that we wanted to discuss, how the academia is reacting to all the situation. How is online teaching going, and how students react to this? Because indeed, you mentioned the graduate who have some issues now, because they have to enter the labor market, and it's not easy to do it during these times, especially in these months when all the companies, one of the strategies they use is not doing any more hirings, because you do not know what's happening with the projects, ongoing projects. You do not know what's happening with the employees that you have now. So usually companies, as a strategies, they are just stopping, closing any kind of new hirings. So how do the graduates feel in these times, and how did your students react, in fact, to the online teaching?
So I have like a couple of seniors who have offer letters in their hands, but they aren't really sure about like what's going to happen. And they aren't, because like they haven't graduated, they have not gone to college to sit for their exams, right? So they don't know if and like when they will graduate, one, and two, if the offer letters that they have in their hand from the placement that college provided, if that's going to stand or not.
Yeah, I can imagine that these are problems for me personally, and I think for Loredana too. This is this time is a kind of blessing, because we are already busy for 2 or 3 years. We have to change the one-sided lecturing into coaching. So, and what we are doing now, and I think Loredana can also tell more about, I have about 50 students, 60 students at this moment who I speak almost every week. And I speak them individual or in duos or with 3 of them. And what I see is you come much closer to students, and they also talk about their experiences. And the first weeks they were very busy with, I miss my social part, I miss the lectures, etc. But now more and more you see that there are also, as a person, they are changing in different approaches, different looking at school, because they get more and more coaching, individual coaching, and less lecturing. We have changed our lecturing already in the last years, the one-sided lecturing, to 50% coaching. We have a different style, as you know. And what you see is that this time this is probably the big change for our university. And the coming half year, we will be doing more online, I think, when it comes to coaching. If I look at 2 years ago, we also had coaching, but if you saw 1 or 2 students per week, it was a lot. Now I meet 30, 40 sometimes in the week. And I don't know what the experience is for Loredana.
Oh, it's basically also the same. We actually had a whole module of change management in the second year. And now that we've done it, well, basically it's very applied. So from day one, they don't get teachers anymore. They work for a consultancy firm, and they have to analyze and find out what needs to change for a real company. I'm actually happy this happened, because I wouldn't have realized how good the module can work because of Teams and because of online meetings, because that gives them the opportunity to actually create that distance with the students and give them the feeling of, okay, I'm in another setting now. When you're in school, you know, you're the teacher, so whatever role you're playing, you're still the teacher. But now you have this advantage, and then the other advantage is you can plan much more. So indeed, you can see much more students, and then it's easier also for them to do what they have to do, and then also give them the time to reflect, because you're not in a hurry to go to the next meeting or to the next session. So in terms of role playing and you know, simulations and these kind of things, I think an online setting, it's a blessing, because you know, if I look at, I'm now also collaborating with a change management consulting company, and they're an international one. And they have offices all over the world, right? So when you're working, they have big clients like Shell or Airbus. These are organizations which work worldwide with, you know, at the same time with people from different offices. And what we're actually experiencing now, this, you know, online virtual teams kind of thing, I think that's going to be the future for the upcoming generation. The downside is exactly what the young colleague from India mentioned. That's, I think it works for us because we are used to our work. But when you just start work, being left somewhere in front of a computer with no human support system next to you that, you know, you want to have is the connection when you start your job. That is something that I'm also hearing from the students, that, you know, as much flexibility as this gives, they would probably, when they start their work, they need more, you know, they need more frameworks. They need the framework so that they have somewhere to start. For us, it's easier this way. So I do not debate this. I love it. So the current situation is for me also indeed more me time and also more work. So it comes with both of them. But I think for the ones who are starting, this is going to be a problem. There's no team. So teams are also, I'm noticing, I'm also part of the team. You lose the sense of a team. There's no more team. So you do become an individual who works for the organization goals, but whereas, you know, we had Scrum type of meetings every Tuesday for half an hour to check in with everybody, especially if you get new people in, right? So if you get new colleagues in who need to figure out what the hell is happening, you don't get teams anymore. So I think a consequence of what's now happening is the starting professionals will have difficulties even with coaching, I think, because they miss that, you know, feeling of, okay, where am I part of something? And the other side is, I think, teams and projects that require a lot of collaboration are slowly, you know, we're still in the honeymoon phase, right? So I think we haven't gone down yet. We're still in the honeymoon phase, and, you know, we're enjoying all the perks of being at home, and, you know, summer holidays coming for everybody. So from that concern, I think nobody's busy, but my feeling is we're going to start feeling this on the long run. And I'm really indeed worried about the starting professionals, because if this continues, if we don't have a place to integrate them in from the human side, this is going to have some consequences. Although we think, you know, the young generation is tech oriented. No.
I know how to use an iPhone.
Sorry?
They can only use the iPhone. That's it.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah. So yeah,
but-
Teams is a big nebulous which they cannot figure out. I'm happy they can use Zoom, but you know, it's just like, what the hell? So,
maybe I can add to what Loredana said. Maybe it makes it also a little bit more clear for the others. We are busy the last 5 years with changing the educational thinking from what we call KSA, which means knowledge, skills, attitude, in that order, to ASK, so attitude, skills, knowledge, which means that this new form that we're doing now is much more focused on what's your attitude. Do you give yourself your own structure? Do you organize your own feedback? Instead of we are telling you everything and you just have to reproduce that. So in that way, you can understand that we are glad with this change, because the whole our whole university is changing now at this moment, because more and more teachers are doing this and they start to like it, because they now finally understand, oh yeah, it's not about knowledge, it's more about attitude. And maybe you have to look at the attitude first and then look at your skills and your own skills. And then maybe you can also order some knowledge yourself. And that in that way, we are looking at this as a kind of pleasure where we are changing. But it also brings some negative parts, and that we are now seeing too, including the ones that Loredana mentioned. So we have to find new ways to deal with that.
Mm-hmm. So what I liked about your approach is this coaching, an individual coaching, which I think is very helpful for the students. In fact, even myself, I had more individual talks with the students that I would used to have in face-to-face teaching. And somehow you realize that you can get closer to the student if you just talk a little bit more individual talk. And I really appreciate these coachings that you give. And I think it's a nice approach to give individual time for each student. It takes a lot of time from you
it takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of time, but it gives you also some more work satisfaction. Mm-hmm. Because you're busy with helping people.
Mm-hmm. Which is good. Joe.
Yeah, I just want to, everything else that has been said thus far is our experience as well. But I want to talk to a point that's being unique to the United States, and to steal from Charles Dickens, it's the best of times, it's the worst of times. I mean, it's the university structure in the United States is undergoing a rapid disruption and change. We were already being disrupted and our structure was changing. The pandemic expedited, and we are seeing many universities close for good. They are just shutting down. Someone like myself, I'm at a large public university of 23,000 students. We can buffer some of the problems that are coming our way. But we call them liberal arts colleges. They usually have smaller class sizes, 10 to 15 students. The professors usually teach 4 classes each semester. Those universities are financially struggling, and here in Illinois, we've had 2 announce that they are closing down forever.
Already?
Yes, it's quite sad to see that rebound and what they're going to do. Are these larger universities now going to absorb them? Are we just going to let the buildings stay vacant forever? And it's just, we don't know. And it's sad to see. It's the natural organizational cycle, but it is sad to see so many universities across the nation that are closing down. Mm-hmm. A second issue that we face in the United States is, I'm sure many of you are aware, U.S. citizens do not like to travel abroad, and it is no different from our students. And the way that we've opened up our student eyes to international thinking is bring the international students to us. And so our student bodies are 10 to 15% international. And now we're faced with this, oh my goodness, how do we get international students to come to the United States? Our Masters of Business program, we are 50% international for our MBA, and we're caught flat-footed. We are still spitballing and trying to come up with ideas to keep our MBA program alive. And so that's kind of that worst of time. Now, the best of time has been, it has forced us to rethink and change our structure. And a lot of it has been for the good.
True. And in Romania, this is not such, we are not so afraid of losing international students because we do not have that many, unfortunately. But again, in UK universities, they are really considering now this situation, and everyone is waiting to see what will happen when we have the admittance system, and they will see if they have or not international students. What about India? How is it over there?
The Indian higher education institutions, which we colleges and universities, students have adopted so well to the online classes and online platform. The students were encouraged to take up even the MOOCs courses. All across India, the adoption of the technology modules and technology learning was very smooth. And we also went in for the initial training of the teachers and students so that they are comfortable in terms of the environment. And we did have issues on some students who came from the remote areas where connectivity could have been the issue, like students from Ladakh and Srinagar. They were still at 2G, where they had the issues on those. But as far as teaching learning environment was concerned, I think teachers, as rightly mentioned by Job, that the teacher played the role of a coach and a facilitator, and the bond between the teacher and the students grew more deeper in COVID time, for the fact because the mental health issues were also addressed. The issues in terms of flexibility of submission of their assignments and their project work, etc., was also taken care of, and a lot of flexibility was given to students in terms of submissions which were due on their part. As far as internships were concerned, for most of the programs, our students went in for online internships, and Indian companies were very open on accepting the students for internships. So, but internships in some of the areas like performing arts, dance, music, they wanted to hold it back till things get normal. So some universities have permitted them to take their internship to the month of December, hoping that by that time things are going to be normal. So I think adoption to the new technology, I feel that three levels of technology transfer can happen. One is that is we adopt the technology, we adapt the technology, and we become adept in technology. So I think reaching to the third level may take little time, but adopting the technology and adapting the technology phase, somehow I think in this lockdown period, worldwide, I feel that every teacher and every student has been able to jump from adoption to adaption, and adapt. I think it may take little time, and in the course of time we will get into the third wave also. As far as the new admissions are concerned, we may have challenges in terms of foreign student admissions, because of reasons known to all of us. Admissions may get delayed, and the delayed admissions will lead to a lot of confusion, and people may not be sure about coming to India. So I do feel that we may have issues on foreign students this time. But we're hopeful that things would be normal soon, and we'll try our level best to attract foreign students to our country.
Monica, I had one last thing I wanted to share about our worst of times. It's when she said adept, that triggered me. We actually have students suing the university for breach of contract because we've changed the learning platform that they agreed to.
Really?
Yes.
You see the cultural differences. Nobody would think, even think, not cross on our mind to sue. Why? This is such an interesting reaction.
Well, in the United States, the collegiate campus is, this is where you spend your early 20s, you become an adult, you engage in things that you couldn't do at home. Athletics are a big part of it. And so the students in their lawsuits are making the case that the universities are robbing them of these developmental experiences. Now, whether this pans out to anything, I don't know, but it is occurring.
Yes. What happened here is we struggled because in the beginning, we do not have an online system that was working before. So we had to do it like in 2 weeks. We had to cover up, to struggle a lot and learn all these platforms and try to find solutions to actually do it. And I think we did a lot of improvements. And I think that will help even after the lockdown is off. But on the other hand, not everyone was able to do it. And we can see even teachers not being able to keep up with all these expectations that now are put on them during with the online system. And on the other hand, what we also noticed that for the students, it was not easy also. For the students, it was even worse than compared to as it was for professors. And why? Because the students come here maybe from rural areas, maybe from less developed areas. They do not have an economical family situation, which is very good. Some of them maybe do not have a computer back home or do not have internet connection, let's say that almost everyone has here. But they are maybe in families where they do not have their own room to study and to be able to focus and to learn for their exams. So they are coming here to Cluj, and here they find a place which is supporting their learning. So students were missing this Cluj area, which is a university area and which is dedicated to learning, and they are encouraged to learn. So not all the students reacted very positively to this situation and switching everything to online. And I must say that I saw more negative reactions coming from the students than coming from teachers, because for them it was a little bit more difficult compared to us. What about Sorin? How is it in your case?
Actually, I want to put a point forward.
Mm-hmm.
So my experience. So I was supposed to be in America for my graduate studies,
Mm-hmm.
to study accounting, and there are some features in the program, like my university is in Virginia, and there would be global immersion programs included in the program, and also different office visits to different companies. So I thought, okay, if these things are not going to be in the program and I would be paying a full tuition fee, then I don't
Mm-hmm.
think it would be a good idea to pay a full tuition fee for that particular program.
I noticed universities did not change their fees, did they?
Yes, no, they did not. And
Yeah.
I was asked to pay the same fee for the online program. And in studying business and overall profession in America related to business involves developing relationships, creating networks, creating personal networks, and everything depends on those things. So if
Mm-hmm.
I would not get the opportunity to create my own network and create and meet other people, professionals who are already working in their jobs, then I don't think it would have been uh, a, a good thing for me.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Oh, very good. Thank you for your input. Sorin?
Yes, I think that it has gone quite well, and I think the reason for that is for both teachers and students. I think the reason for that is, as I mentioned before, in general, the Finnish society has quite a high level of digital skills, and the online infrastructure and platform was already in place before COVID-19 and used quite a lot. So it has not led to any technical or challenge other than maybe this social dimension that I mentioned before. Of course, it's it's not maybe not as easy to follow, and not as easy to engage, not as easy to interact and to learn from others as you interact. So that's also the dimension of the synergies that can occur during class teaching, for instance, that would not occur in an online manner. But of course, there are also advantages to online teaching, as we know in general. But what I think that academic life has continued quite well. But I'm not sure about other countries and other universities if you have also had online PhD defenses, because this I find is quite fascinating that you could actually defend your PhD your PhD online. Who would have thought about this?
We do them here now online, and I think it's so good.
we do them too.
Yeah.
Okay, so it seems to be quite prevalent.
I will just ask a few questions that we got by YouTube. Someone is asking about the trust level. How do you feel? What happened to the trust, the employees' trust in their companies, individuals' trust, citizens' trust in the government? How did it change during this period? Anyone? I was thinking of myself.
We've never trusted our government, so nothing changed there. We're kind of cynical all the time. And if anybody has seen the world news, you can see we pick apart everyone. We don't believe any of you. Tell me.
I think also it's a huge matter of trust. And here in Romania, the trust level is pretty low compared to other European countries. And you can see the consequences in the way we interact with the others.
I have to be honest, in the Netherlands, it raised the trust in the government, the trust in any employers. For sure it went higher. Now it's going down a little because people are now getting enough and they want to be free more. But the level, they did some research on that, the level of trust in the government raised from already high 60, 70 till 80, 90 even.
Oh,
in
that's
the beginning.
Good. Yeah. That's good.
I think it's the same. It's the same in Finland, I would say. Yes, I think that the people in general believed or considered that the measures that the government took were positive. And of course, having Sweden, which is nearby, which is not considered to be a good case in this case, and comparing somehow, because Finland and Sweden, they are, Swedish is the second official language in Finland. So they're quite, it's like your neighbor nearby. You are looking towards it, you are comparing with it, and so forth. So in a way that boosted, I think, trust, because it believed that the government indeed should have taken these measures. And even now economic data seems, because in Swedish case, the argument was that you want to save economic life and business life by not imposing the lockdown. But it seems now that the data seems to suggest that actually the economy in Swedish is not doing better than the Finnish economy, for instance. So it didn't seem to have any positive impact either way by not imposing the lockdown. So now even of seeing this, of course, also people in Finland believe that the measures were right, and this supported their trust. And for me, in my case, more on a personal level, I'm Romanian. I'm Romanian at heart, and I will always be Romanian at heart. But seeing how people respond to this, and if the government says, the government said that we should go out to do some exercises, they go out to do the exercises. They are not questioning it, not fabricating it, not thinking twice about. We do it because the government said that, and so forth. So it was quite quite interesting to see how people follow this public authority in their life. Let's say it was quite fascinating.
Yeah, I would say
sorry.
No, go ahead.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to, the researcher Hofstede was talking about power distance. In US, in America, we don't recognize that power distance. We think everyone's on equal footing. And so we're challenging every authority along the way. And it's been quite unique to see it break along political party ideology. on how to approach this situation. And
Yes.
I didn't realize even my own close friends were so polarized in their political views.
I just went, Monica, I wanted to add here was people must also understand that the disruption in their lives have also impacted the disruption in the life of the multinational firms, the smaller firms, the government's life. Everybody has been affected. So we need to give a buffer time to all of them to create and recreate and resume the trust with the people. That connect will happen as soon as we are through with the pandemic. Things would normalize with the new normal and the actual normal coming in. I think everything is going to settle down. It's bound to happen. Mistrust is bound to be there, but at the same time, I think all governments with their sincere efforts have been doing best possible things on their part. And that's what I look at the government initiatives, be it United States or UK or Europe or India or Asia or any other country. I think everyone has tried, every government has tried its level best. The wisdom may differ from the federal system to the central government doing it. The wisdom may be different at both the levels. But I think with the good intention, every government has tried its level best to do and contain the problem as far as possible. So I think people need to also give some little buffer time for this, for trust to
A bit
resume.
of patience. Mhm.
Patience.
Good. And because we should get closer to the end, we have at least some questions from YouTube, but let's go only with one. The question is what companies or organizations can do in order to make the employees feel more secure or feel more satisfied with their jobs. What do you think companies could do? Not only companies, because universities can also be included here.
I think it's the same as it was before COVID. Empower your people and give them a lot of own responsibility.
Exactly.
Because people want responsibility, and if you give it to them, there are many ways to do that. So I think this is still the big word. It's already for years there. Empower your people.
I would say there's a great leadership theory called the situational leadership theory by Hershey and Blanchard, and you've as if I'm speaking to a direct supervisor, what I'm saying is you really need to know your subordinates and your coworkers and what their tolerance for, say, ambiguity is, how much autonomy do they desire, and you have to work in and use that situational awareness to lead them appropriately.
Good. And if there are anything?
See, we all understand that the VUCA environment is there everywhere. Volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity. And we also know how to handle this VUCA because this is going to stay forever, be it pandemic or non-pandemic environment. Businesses are going to be facing VUCA forever. So I think the volatility needs to be addressed by a good vision, vision which is suited to the times, well tested. And I think organizations have learned to evolve all that. And then uncertainty by understanding these situations becomes very important, and complexity by the clarity, as Joseph rightly said, that situational leadership would play such an important role. And that clarity will only come by the leaders who are handling these situations at that particular time is going to be very, very important. And the ambiguity in the environment is by agility we can create in the organization by involving everyone into the cause. That's so very important. Engaging people into this process is going to be so very important for all of us. That's what my suggestion is. Yeah.
Thank you very much for your input. If anyone else wants to ask a question, we can take one question from the ones who are here on Zoom. No? Okay. In that case, I would like to sum up our meeting, which is not easy because there were so many diverse ideas and so many different experience. But we could also notice some well-shared experiences. And what I can conclude is how important it is in these times to keep our individual relationships, especially with our students, and as you just mentioned now with our employees, as knowing your subordinates, knowing the people you are working with, because this is what they need, support and understanding and a good relationship with someone else. It could be a supervisor, or it could be a teacher, or it could be another role model they can have. Then another point a lesson to take home is empowering people and let them take responsibility. Because this is, I think, one of the secrets that's always successful. You know, trust, it goes along with trust. It goes together with the trust. So you empower people, you trust them, and you let them take responsibilities. In fact, this is confirmed not only studies that we have in the academic world, but also by my own experience in an IT company here again in Romania, where they focus more on autonomy, letting the employees to be autonomous, and giving them responsibility. Because once you take responsibility, you are more in charge, you feel in charge, and you put more effort towards the goals that you want to achieve. And as Anu Singh mentioned, I like that idea very much about patient, and making people aware that we need to be patient, and that we need to allow some buffering time in order for things to settle down and not to be so reactive in these times. So I would like to thank you very much for being here and for putting your time into this meeting. I would like to thank Santosh again for initiating this event and for organizing it, and for taking care of a lot of the backup stuff that need to be prepared for such an event. And I would like to thank the speakers and panelists for their input, because I think we have learned a lot from your experience, or from your the data that you shared with us. And let's hope we will have some future other meetings that I hope you had fun also, because fun is important besides the knowledge that we get. And I also like to thank the students and the other persons that who attended us and put their time in joining our meeting. So thank you all, and wish you a good day in US, like a good evening in the other areas. And let's hope we will meet each other face to face, not only online in the future. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye, everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Ciao.
Thank you.